Coming up on One America News, an air ambulance crashes in Philadelphia, killing at least 6. We'll have the latest on the second horrific crash of the week. Plus, California officials say the Palisades and Eaton fires are now fully contained following weeks of chaos. What's next as investigators search for the cause? And the Democratic National Committee has a new chair who they selected. Today, Saturday, February 1st. This edition of One America News starts right now. Car driver is among multiple casualties reported in Philadelphia after a Learjet 55 crashed into several buildings near Roosevelt Mall. On Friday, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy confirmed 2 pilots, 2 doctors, 1 child patient, and 1 family member died in the crash. The FAA and NTSB have been tasked with the investigation. President Trump issued a statement on Truth Social saying, quote, "So sad to see the plane go down in Philadelphia. More innocent souls lost. Our people are totally engaged." Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro addressing the public during a press conference alongside Philadelphia Mayor Sherrell Parker.
We have, at the request of Commissioner Bethel, 45 state troopers who are on the ground right here in Northeast Philly. We have 25 members of our PennDOT team who are here right now. We have members of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Authority who are here, including our director, Randy Padfield, who joins me behind here. We also have members of DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, who are here to make sure that any hazardous materials are addressed.
This story is developing. We'll be sure to provide more details as it enters our newsroom.
Everyone in this White House continues to mourn the victims and keep their friends and families in our thoughts and prayers during this unimaginable time.
The White House giving an update on the Trump administration's response to the deadly D.C. mid-air plane collision. In a Friday press briefing, the press secretary detailed an executive memo signed by the president in his push for accountability over the incident. She noted this includes a review of hiring and aviation standards under the previous administration. Leavitt also pointed out the president sought to take action on aviation safety in his first week of office.
The review will include a comprehensive assessment and reversal of any deterioration in hiring standards and aviation safety standards and protocols during the previous administration. Aviation safety was addressed by President Trump before this tragic collision even took place. On his second day in office, the president signed a memorandum to immediately stop Biden DEI hiring programs and return to non-discriminatory, merit-based hiring.
Leavitt also said President Trump will continue to lead on aviation safety and will continue to deliver the promises he made. California officials say the Palisades and Eaton fires are now 100% contained after burning for more than 3 weeks. The announcement Friday comes after the fires burned more than 37,000 acres, destroyed or damaged nearly 18,000 structures, and claimed the lives of at least 29 people. Investigators are still working to determine the cause of both. Officials say full containment means the fires are under control, but hotspots may still linger as crews continue their cleanup efforts. Also, President Trump is moving forward with his tariffs push, and the targets of those actions are scrambling to respond. Here's more.
Tariffs are coming to Mexico, Canada, and China. That's what the Trump White House promised on Friday. President Trump unveiled plans to announce the tariffs on Saturday, which are expected to include a 25% tariff on products on America's neighbors and a 10% on products from China.
We're going to be putting tariffs on steel and aluminum, and we'll give you an announcement as to what the exact date is. but it'll be a tremendous amount of money for our country. A tremendous amount. These are big numbers. And in addition to that, and you see the power of the tariff. I mean, the tariff is good, and nobody can compete with us because we have by far the biggest piggy bank. And so that'll take place very quickly. But also we'll be doing pharmaceuticals. And to bring our industry back, we want to bring pharmaceuticals back to the country. And the way you bring it back to the country is by putting up a wall, and the wall is a tariff wall.
But failed Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warns a trade war could commence if his country is slapped with tariffs. He claims his side of the border is safe and secure, and warned Canada could face severe negative consequences if Trump makes good on his promise. And he gave a lukewarm threat to retaliate.
If the president does choose to implement any tariffs against Canada, we're ready with a response. A purposeful, forceful, but reasonable, immediate response. It's not what we want, but if he moves forward, we will also act.
For her part, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum took a more diplomatic approach to the tariffs threat. She said her government will work with the Trump administration to hash out their trade differences and stressed she has many options to respond to Trump's actions.
Ya hay esta mesa de diálogo.
There is a dialogue table, and we have Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C for whatever the government of the United States decides. Now, it is very important for the people of Mexico to know that we will always defend the dignity of our people, that we will always defend the respect of our sovereignty, and a dialogue as equals. As we have always mentioned, without subordination. We are going to wait, as I have always said, with a cool head.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is pushing a diplomatic approach to Trump's foreign policy agenda. He's embarking on his first trip abroad to El Salvador, Panama, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. Rubio believes building relations with countries in the Western Hemisphere will help curb immigration, crime, and terrorist threats to the U.S. Secretary Rubio is expected to begin meeting with officials on Saturday. And Trump is expected to announce his first batch of tariffs on Saturday and says oil and gas tariffs will be announced February 18th.
President Trump orders a strike against a senior ISIS official and other terrorists related to the group in Somalia. Taking to Truth Social, the president said that he ordered the precision strikes against an ISIS attack planner and numerous individuals he helped recruit and lead. He said that the terrorists were all in a cave which was imploded by the strikes, killing them but leaving civilians unharmed. The president said the U.S. had been following this particular terrorist leader for years, but Joe Biden's administration didn't act quickly enough to take him out. He ended his message by warning ISIS, quote, "We will find you and we will kill you." Meanwhile, the Department of Education is revising a law that prohibits sexual discrimination in K-12 schools and colleges. The department sent a notice to schools and colleges Friday, notifying them of the decision to scrap Title IX provisions added under the Biden administration. Title IX prohibits discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation and outlines how sexual assault cases are handled. The revision recognizes sex as the immutable, objective characteristics or biological sex at birth. All right, the DNC is selecting Minnesota State Party Chair Ken Martin to be the next chair of the National Party. Martin won 246 of 428 total members voting on the first ballot, securing the leadership position. And just ahead of this selection, the Minnesotan said he would work to help working people and immigrants.
Democrats need to ask ourselves each day, whose side are we on? Which side are we on? Are we on the side of the robber baron, the ultra-wealthy billionaire, the oil and gas polluter, the union buster, or are we on the side of the American working family, the small business owner, the farmer, the immigrant, and the students?
Martin received a few high-profile endorsements, although second-place candidate Wisconsin State Chair Ben Wickler received the backing of Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. And One American News will soon have a dedicated office in the Pentagon's Correspondence Corridor. That's according to a memo sent by the Pentagon Friday, announcing a new annual media rotation. As part of this program, a news outlet from every broadcast medium which has access to the Pentagon, which had access to the Pentagon's office spaces, will now be rotated out in order to broaden access to alternative media. Now, the memo announced that this year, the New York Times, NPR, NBC, and Politico must vacate their spots in the corridor by February 14th. In their place, Breitbart, the New York Post, Huffington Post, and yours truly, OAN, will be granted an office space in the Pentagon for the next year. We're back to national headlines. The NTSB providing an update on its investigation into Wednesday night's deadly midair plane crash. Officials Friday said air traffic control are still conducting interviews and will continue over the next few days. 2 recorders have been recovered from the crash site, including a flight data recorder said to be in good condition, along with a cockpit voice recorder and a black box from the Black Hawk helicopter. Officials said they don't plan on releasing a manifest.
The NTSB will not and has not released a manifest. We have not in our history, not in our past. We will not be in this accident. In fact, there's specific congressional language that whenever it is in our possession, it is not available through the Freedom of Information Act. It will not be included in our report. We will not be putting any names of any of the victims.
Officials said any information would only come from other individuals or groups. Meanwhile, students protest a Republican-led event focused on deporting immigrants at Arizona State University. Here's more.
Hundreds of Arizona State University students gather at a GOP-led event to protest against reporting criminal classmates to ICE. The protest began Friday as people gathered outside the Memorial Union, home of College Republicans United. One member of the student organization, Isaiah Alvarado, said we can't even break over 1,000 deportations a day, but maintain they focus on criminals.
Tom Hoffman, the border czar, and J.D. Vance, and numerous Republican pundits and spokespeople, they've all said we're prioritizing violent criminals. These are known people with a criminal record. We're not going after, random people. And that's not in the cards. And I don't think that's ever going to be in the cards. If there's criminal violators on your campus, the law must be enforced. Simple as is. There's no buts and if. There's no, we want to enforce the law because of whatever standard. That's not how a country functions. Without actually enforcing the law, we have lawlessness.
Alvarado maintained they don't advocate for vigilantism, but something needs to be done. The CEO of Aliento, a nonprofit leadership organization that focuses on supporting illegal immigrants, said there were hateful messages coming from the other side, and school isn't somewhere someone should be afraid to show up to.
And what it really does, it's instilling fear for them not to go to school. And I think that sometimes, I don't know what their intentions are. I just pray that they see our students as humans and that despite of all the hateful rhetoric, our students are going to persevere because our parents made so many sacrifices for us to get an education. And despite of those obstacles, we're going to pursue it.
College Republicans United said if someone needs to make a report, to visit the ICE website and fill out a tip form.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott issues an executive order regarding DEI. In a Friday press release, Abbott directed all agencies to eliminate their DEI policies. The governor said DEI is divisive and gravitates away from constitutional principles. Abbott maintained the nation must reject race-based favoritism or discrimination and stick to a merit-based system. Also, lawyers for New York City Mayor Eric Adams meet with DOJ officials. And on Friday, sources confirmed that Adams' legal team met with DOJ lawyers in D.C. to discuss possibly dropping the corruption case being made against him. This comes after the mayor was indicted on 5 counts, including bribery, campaign finance violations, and conspiracy. Neither Adams or the DOJ have commented on these reports. But a portion of local California beach remains closed following a destructive landslide. Authorities say the landslide occurred at Thousand Steps Beach in Laguna early Friday morning. It reportedly caused a part of the infamous Thousand Steps staircase to collapse, but no civilian injuries have been reported, though the cause of the landslide remains unknown. City officials say an investigation is ongoing, including a geologist assessing the scene. The beach will remain closed during the investigation. And from a bird flu outbreak in the Golden State to a mid-air crash in D.C., One America's Jericho Dancel has our weekly countdown.
National headlines will always be at the forefront of news coverage around the country, but that doesn't mean we can't shine a spotlight on stories that happen at the local level. So let's take a look at some of the top stories which may have slipped under the radar in your One America News Weekly Countdown, Spotlight Edition. Our first entry takes us to sunny California, where the first outbreak of the H5N9 bird flu strain was reported. The World Organization for Animal Health confirmed the discovery, adding they discovered the more common H5N1 strain at a duck farm. 119,000 birds were killed to contain the virus, with experts saying this new discovery could complicate future containment efforts. From the world of virus outbreaks to the world of state politics, as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis continues feuding with state lawmakers over how to carry out President Trump's immigration policies. During a press conference, DeSantis said he would veto a GOP-led immigration bill, which he describes as, quote, weak and watered down. The legislation would strip him of emergency enforcement powers, among other provisions. DeSantis went on to question why the bill has yet to appear at his desk.
If this is such good legislation, why have they not sent me the bill yet to act on? Why are they holding the bill for me to act on? And I think the reason is because if we get the bill and we do an event where we have a lot of people and I veto the bill in front of this crowd, is the crowd going to cheer or is the crowd going to boo? Crowd's going to cheer.
Despite this, DeSantis says he hopes lawmakers will come together and pass stronger legislation. We go to Illinois for our next entry, where former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot released a report on the so-called supermayor Tiffany Henyard. According to Lightfoot, Henyard and several members of her administration attempted to hide the financial condition of the village from trustees and the public eye. Additionally, the report showed village credit cards were used on a massive spending spree. This included $171,000 in travel-related costs and $218,000 from Amazon. Lightfoot pressed further, saying the village's insurance coverage has dropped dramatically.
The other significant concession was that the insurance carriers refused to cover Mayor Henyard.
Henyard was just recently found in contempt of court, and the FBI is also investigating her for financial misconduct. Let's turn our attention away from local politics and take a quick look at the legal troubles of former Senator Bob Menendez. Menendez was sentenced to 11 years behind bars after being found guilty on bribery and corruption charges. The former New Jersey lawmaker was also found to have been acting as a foreign agent, which is a first for a U.S. senator. Menendez delivered remarks after his sentencing where he maintained his innocence.
I am innocent, and I look forward to filing appeals on a whole host of issues. But let me just say this. This whole process has been nothing but a political witch hunt.
He will begin his prison sentence on June 6. Our final entry breaks the rules of this countdown slightly, but it's still important to acknowledge on our list. A tragic scene unfolded in Washington, D.C. after an American Airlines jetliner carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members collided with 3 soldiers inside a Black Hawk helicopter. The collision occurred over the Potomac River, sending both aircraft into the freezing cold water. An investigation was launched following an initial search and rescue operation. Officials said it is an all-hands-on-deck effort, and they are leaving no stone unturned. Those impacted by the incident have already begun the grieving process, with the city of Wichita in Kansas holding a prayer vigil in honor of the victims.
During this tragedy, it is a reminder of how fragile life is on Earth. In these times of uncertainty and difficulty, I focus on my faith.
The flight's passengers included a group of figure skaters, their coaches, and relatives who had just recently left a development camp after a figure skating competition in Wichita. A preliminary report is expected within the next 30 days. And with that, I'm Jericho Dancel, and that was your One America News Weekly Countdown. See you again next week.
Ahead, Hamas releases more Israeli hostages. We'll have the latest on the ongoing. All right, President Donald Trump's order to pause foreign aid is resulting in the suspension of over $1 million in funding for diversity programs in Ireland and Serbia. According to House Foreign Affairs Chairman Brian Mast, the funds included $1.5 million for a Serbian pro-LGBTQ group and $70,000 for a DEI-themed musical in Ireland. Mast criticized the spending, calling it a waste of taxpayer money. The administration is also freezing most existing foreign assistance for 90 days, pending a review led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Also, former German president and ex-head of the International Monetary Fund, Horst Kohler, has died. Kohler died this morning in Berlin after battling illness. The former president led Germany from 2004 to 2010, gaining popularity for his outspoken views and independence before resigning abruptly over controversial comments about the military. Kohler also played a key role in shaping the euro and negotiating German reunification. He is survived by his wife and their 2 children. He was 81 years old. More Israeli hostages released after being held captive by Hamas for over a year. Lucy Fielder has this.
Israeli-American Keith Siegel is released by Hamas at Gaza's seaport on Saturday, one of 3 Israelis handed over to the Red Cross in the latest exchange. Ofer Calderon, a French-Israeli dual national, was released in Khan Yunis, as was Yarden Bibas. The fate of Bibas's family is unknown. His baby son, Kafir, and 4-year-old Ariel were the youngest to be taken hostage by Hamas in the October 7, 2023 attack. His wife, Shiri, is still missing too. Saturday's handover in Gaza saw none of the chaotic scenes that overshadowed one 2 days earlier, when Hamas guards struggled to shield hostages from a surging crowd. Once again, there was a show of force by Palestinian militants, despite the heavy losses they suffered in more than 15 months of war. At the newly opened Rafah crossing, the first Palestinian patients were allowed to leave Gaza for Egypt, including children suffering from cancer and heart conditions. Hamas's attack, which sparked the war, killed 1,200 people in Israel, according to Israeli tallies. As the fighting has fallen quiet, diplomatic efforts to build a wider settlement have stepped up. Negotiations are due to start by Tuesday on the second phase of the deal, meant to see the release of the remaining hostages, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and an end, at last, to the war.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro calls for illegals to leave their jobs in the U.S. and return home. In a Friday X post, Petro said, quote, "Wealth only produced by the working people," adding Colombians living in the United States illegally should return and help him build what he describes as social wealth. Also, he said his government will offer business loans to anyone who takes his offer. This comes after both him and President Trump had a dispute over 2 deportation flights, which ultimately resulted in Petro flying illegals back into his country. And Norway seizes a second ship accused of causing serious damage to an undersea cable. Friday, Norwegian police boarded and seized the Silver Dania, which is suspected of damaging telecom cables in the Baltic Sea. The Norwegian Coast Guard seized the cargo ship at the request of Latvian authorities. The owner of the Silver Dania, the Silver Sea Shipping Group, denied involvement in damaging the cables. This comes after Sunday's seizure of a Maltese cargo ship by Swedish authorities, which was also accused of damaging the cables. And ahead this hour, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker All right, welcome to the Saturday edition of What America News. I'm Dana Alexa. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is ordering state agencies to block January 6 defendants from holding government positions. In a letter to the state's Central Management Services, Pritzker said participation on J6 is antithetical to Illinois' values. Pritzker cites a state law that mandates the rejection of candidates who've engaged in, quote, infamous or disgraceful conduct. The directive comes after President Trump pardoned nearly 1,500 January 6 defendants on his first day of office. The Democrat governor claims the move is about protecting the integrity and values of the state workforce. Also, President Trump announces more tariffs. Speaking from his Oval Office Friday, Trump said he'll be putting more tariffs on computer chips, steel, aluminum, and pharmaceuticals. Some will be put in place on February 18th. It comes after the press secretary said Trump is set to impose tariffs on Mexico and Canada starting February 1st. He also stressed the mid-air crash in D.C., saying the helicopter was too high and was out of its zone.
I'm so tired of listening to things happen to our country and then people say we'll do an investigation and 3 years later they come out with a report that nobody looks at. Especially, not in all cases can you do that, but in this case, you had a helicopter that was, the Black Hawk was too high. It was above the 200 limit by double. It shouldn't have been there. And there were some other mistakes made too, and I pointed them out also, and I was right on all of it, but they'll still do an investigation just to check it out.
One America's Chief White House correspondent Daniel Baldwin has more on the second press briefing.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt held her second press briefing Friday afternoon as the Trump administration continues to respond to the deadly collision between an American Airlines plane and an Army helicopter, killing 67 people.
First, within moments of the collision, the president and his newly appointed team were in immediate communication. President Trump swiftly signed a memorandum directing an immediate assessment of the Federal Aviation Administration to ensure the federal government is maintaining the highest personnel and policy aviation safety standards. The memorandum directs the Secretary of Transportation and the FAA Administrator to immediately review all hiring decisions and changes to safety protocols made during the prior 4 years, and to take all necessary corrective actions to achieve uncompromised aviation safety.
Despite the president's belief that DEI has pervaded the aviation industry, Leavitt emphasized the president still believes Americans should be confident in flying.
He believes that it is still indeed safe and Americans should feel safe traveling our skies. With that said, two things can be true at the same time.
The press secretary also confirmed Trump's intentions to slap tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China as a response for the deadly fentanyl pouring across the borders of the United States.
The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept by the president.
The U.S. is the primary trading partner with both Mexico and Canada, with data showing that Mexico's export revenue from the United States was more than $600 billion in 2024. Leavitt reassured Americans that the tariffs would not be inflationary.
I think Americans who are concerned about increased prices should look at what President Trump did in his first term. He effectively implemented tariffs, and the average inflation rate during the first Trump administration was 1.9%. In fact, when President Trump left office, it was 1.4%. So President Trump is going to do everything he possibly can to cut the inflation crisis that the previous administration imposed on the American people, and he will continue to effectively utilize tariffs.
Leavitt also highlighted how President Trump has ordered the DOD and DHS to expand operational use of Guantanamo Bay to hold violent illegal migrant criminals.
We know that we have an issue with detention space here in the interior, which is a big reason why Congress needs to pass this reconciliation package as quickly as possible to ensure that DHS and ICE have the funding they need to detain these individuals that the administration is very swiftly rounding up and deporting, arresting and deporting these illegal immigrant criminals. And so the president feels it's an appropriate place. Taxpayers are already funding it. The space is there. Why not use it? And the Secretary of Defense, as I said, is working on that as we speak.
Trump also partook in a roundtable on school choice after the National Report Card revealed troubling numbers about American education.
The National Report Card showed that 70% of 8th graders were below proficient in reading, and 40% of 4th graders did not even meet the basic reading levels. This is completely unacceptable to the president, and he continues to take aggressive actions to address this education problem in our country.
Wrapping up his second week in office, Trump is scheduled to spend the weekend at Mar-a-Lago. Daniel Baldwin, One American News, the White House.
President Trump signing a memo dropping collective bargaining agreements by putting that into effect by the Biden administration. Now, Trump sent out the order Friday directing federal agencies to reject last-minute agreements, which White House officials say were designed to restrict the Trump administration from reforming the government. The memo would prohibit agencies from making collective bargaining agreements in the last 30 days of a presidential term. And the White House said any agreements made before that time will remain in effect while Trump's administration works out a better deal for Americans. Officials at the CDC are ordered to end their DEI practices. In a Friday memo, CDC employees were asked to terminate all programs, personnel, and activities that promote DEI. Officials were also told to remove pronouns and any related information from their email signatures. This comes as part of President Trump's executive orders for the removal of DEI from federal agencies. Also, the Trump administration is letting go of the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Rohit Chopra. Chopra confirmed his exit today in a letter addressed to President Trump. This comes after the White House notified him of his dismissal via email earlier this morning. And Chopra was appointed in 2021 by Biden and had a term set to run through 2026. His deputy, Zixta Martinez, will serve as acting director until a successor is appointed. Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of mRNA vaccines, says he supports Robert F. Kennedy as HHS secretary. Here's One America's John Hines.
I'm wondering also, I can't help thinking about what we're talking about now and these confirmation hearings of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Do you perceive that someone like RFK Jr., if he were the head of HHS, might be someone who would perhaps force more transparency? He talks about radical transparency on these agencies. Is that really what is needed here, is essentially sunlight?
I think that increased transparency and disclosure of information that has largely been redacted or there's been huge amounts of resistance to disclosing it under Freedom of Information Act. That disclosure, we would hope, will lead to increased public support for reform. That's how this has to happen. We can't start with legislative change. It's hard even to initiate major bureaucratic change without public support. And the way we get public support is through transparency and disclosure, hoping that as the public learns what's taken place here and how they have been prevented from informing themselves, then they will become more strong advocates for legislative and administrative change in these agencies. Because what we're going to face is going to be the type of resistance that we've seen in these Senate hearings, where you have senators that represent constituencies that have benefited greatly by the pharmaceutical industry. I'm thinking of Boston, for instance, being very aggressive in trying to resist the nomination and confirmation of Bobby Kennedy because of the threat that they apparently perceive him representing to the vested interests of their major donors and constituency.
I believe you know him on some level. And what is going on there? Why does he seem to be having so much resistance, particularly from Democrats? Obviously, he's a former Democrat, I think an independent, and now, of course, nominated to work in a Republican administration. Is this simply partisanship, or is there more going on there, do you suppose?
Well, thank you. I do know Bobby fairly well, and I consider him a friend and colleague. I worked very closely with him in the editing of the Real Anthony Fauci book. I've traveled with him. He disclosed to me his interests in running for the presidency long before that was public. It's been my privilege to consider him a friend and colleague. Although I did meet with him briefly on Inauguration Day in the evening. And my impression is that he is in many ways transformed compared to the Bobby that I knew 2 years ago. He has certainly been tested in the crucible over the last couple of years.
In your opinion, Dr. Malone, is RFK Jr., or Bobby as you call him, is he the right guy for the job, do you think?
I think he may be the right guy for this moment in time. You know, I chose not to endorse him as president. I chose to endorse President Trump. My sense was that Bobby is a key opinion leader, thought leader. He has been at the forefront as an attorney of advocating for public health. For him, Make America Healthy Again is not just a slogan. It's something that in many ways he spent his entire life pursuing. That he isn't a seasoned DC insider, and he doesn't know the various nuanced ways that the senior executive service can work its will on political appointees. But I think he's backstopped that with bringing in people to support him that are quite competent. And that same criticism extends to his appointments at both NIH and FDA and CDC. These are not people that are seasoned government insiders that know how to work the system, but in each case, they have been teamed with people who are. And I think this is really a good strategy. You have leaders across the board here that are able to speak out, willing to do so, have acted with integrity and forthrightness in the past, teamed with people that understand how to make things work inside DC.
Very good. Dr. Robert Malone, it is a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Two Long Island police unions endorsed Kash Patel to be the next FBI director. In a letter sent to the Senate Judiciary Thursday, two county police unions endorsed Patel, saying his leadership will enhance FBI capabilities and refocus the Bureau's priorities. They say he has multiple levels of law enforcement and national security experience, making him the right pick to lead the agency. And this comes after Patel took his turn for a confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill earlier this week. President Trump is taking action on school choice. Trump gathered GOP governors at the White House Friday for the National School Choice Week roundtable. A senior White House official said this administration will empower parents throughout the nation to direct their children's education. The White House press secretary echoed this at Friday's press briefing.
The president believes American education should focus on cultivating patriotic citizens who are ready for the workforce. And this action will help get schools back on track and defend fundamental parental rights in education. The president also signed a school choice executive order expanding educational freedom and opportunity for families.
This comes days after Trump signed an executive order to expand education freedom in America. One America's Chief White House correspondent Daniel Baldwin has more.
We're here in the White House wrapping up a roundtable on school choice. Blessed to have a few minutes here with Tiffany Justice. You're a part of that roundtable. Can you brief us on what happened, the president's thoughts on everything, specifically that executive order regarding school choice? What's your reaction?
President Trump has been very clear that he is putting parents in the driver's seat when it comes to their children's education. And so everything he has done so far in this past 10 days of executive orders has shown that we're going to get indoctrination out of our schools, and we're going to make sure that parents are making the decision for where their children go to school. So it was a dynamic group of people who had a lot of ideas and thoughts for the president as to how he can help parents to be in control of their kids' lives.
Tiffany, school choice is one of the most fundamental civil rights issues facing the country right now. President Trump has worked to tackle it the first 2 weeks. Talk about the progress that has been made on the issue thanks to President Trump's leadership in the last 2 weeks, and where else we still need to go.
So there's been an enormous amount of progress in red states across the country, and we talked about that a little bit today. President Trump supporting candidates that are pro-school choice in places like Texas are going to result in school choice bills being passed there. But what the president is doing as far as taking executive action with an executive order promoting school choice in blue states is so incredibly important, so that families are not complicit in the harm to their kids, that they're not forced to send their children to a failing school. Also, the Department of Defense, the DODEA programs, we have people that are serving in military service across the country, and their children are being forced to go to schools where they're being indoctrinated. Some of the most woke things I've seen out of schools have been out of government military schools, and so giving parents that option, giving Pete Hegseth the opportunity to give parents choice across the world to make sure that their kids are getting a good education is really important. We are thankful for the president.
Do you think that some of these measures will encourage younger people to be less hesitant about having kids, knowing that education and the standards for it and the options available for parents to get their children good education? Do you think that'll give them more encouragement to have families and have more babies, knowing that this is at their disposal?
The president is making America great again, and so I think that alone is going to help to encourage people to have more babies. But parental rights are fundamental. This isn't a right the government gives you or they can take away easily. This is something that comes from God. And so I think the more that we change our culture, the more that we prioritize children, it's just going to encourage more and more people to have families.
How would you rate the president's first 2 weeks in office? A lot of people are saying home run, grand slam, all the above. How would you rate it so far?
Is there anything better than an A+ that I can give him? I think he's done a wonderful job responding to voters. He's listened to the American people, and the American people want change. They want to have more control over their lives. They want the federal government to be put back in that tiny box that it belongs in, and he is certainly doing that.
And lastly, Tiffany, listening to a Trump rally, he traversed the entire state, the country. Towards the end, he would always mention this specific issue, school choice, parental rights, and it was just one of those lines that just always got one of the loudest pops throughout his speeches consistently, and he always mentioned it, and he's like, I can't believe I have to say it. It's just common sense. Do you think that he's bringing common sense back to the country?
President Trump is the common sense president, and he is the president for all American people. And what I know is that every parent wants their child to be successful in life, wants them to learn to read and write and do math. And so, again, President Trump is a president for every American, and we're very, very excited to see what the results of all of these different executive orders and actions will be. And I think it's going to translate to better student achievement and stronger families.
Tiffany Justice, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And ahead, Mark Zuckerberg is reportedly looking to move Meta's legal headquarters out of Delaware. According to the Wall Street Journal Friday, Meta is in talks to move their facility to Texas or another business-friendly state. Meta's discussions with Texas officials reportedly began before President Trump won back the White House. This follows Elon Musk's decision to move Tesla and SpaceX out of Delaware and into the Lone Star State. Well, Paramount Global is reportedly in talks with President Trump's legal team to settle over producing the edited 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. And reports say both parties are trying to quickly bring an end to the lawsuit filed last fall. Staffers at CBS and other mainstream media outlets are reportedly alarmed, saying it undermines their so-called journalistic standards. Paramount is currently working on a merger deal with Skydance Media, but the deal needs to be approved by Trump's FCC. And the stock market closes out the week slightly lower after President Trump said he will make good on his tariff threats for Canada, Mexico, and China. Take a look.
U.S. stocks ended lower on Friday after the White House said President Trump will implement 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports and 10% tariffs on Chinese goods beginning Saturday. The Dow lost 0.75%, the S&P 500 shed 0.5%, and the Nasdaq dipped more than 0.25%. Uncertainty over the impact of tariffs has muddled the outlook for the economy and inflation. But Ben McMillan, co-founder and chief investment officer at IDX Advisors, said there's a chance the tariffs could be short-lived.
A lot of this rhetoric generally ends up being a strong-arm negotiating tactic. So I'd be surprised if these tariffs, stay in place for any meaningful length of time. That said, they are sizable. 25% is a very big number, and so the fallout is not going to be trivial.
Earlier on Friday, a report from the Commerce Department showed a moderate increase in inflation last month, reinforcing expectations that the Federal Reserve would not lower interest rates anytime soon. Stocks on the move Friday included Apple. Shares were volatile, but ultimately closed lower, despite the tech giant saying it expects to recover from a dip in iPhone sales as it rolls out AI features. Shares of Chevron fell more than 4.5% after the oil producer reported fourth quarter earnings below estimates. And ExxonMobil shares also closed lower after the company posted mixed fourth quarter results that showed weakness in its refining and chemicals business.
The price of retiring an apartment in some major cities in the U.S. is on the rise, and that's according to a recent national rent report by real estate platform Zumper. According to that report, the price for a one-bedroom apartment is up 2.5% nationwide compared to the same time last year. In terms of price, New York City remains the most expensive place to rent, with an average apartment price costing over $4,280 a month. San Francisco came in second place with an average of $3,160 a month. NASA astronaut Suni Williams breaks a record while being stranded on the ISS. She broke the record for total spacewalk time by a female astronaut with 62 hours and 6 minutes clocked in. Williams surpassed Peggy Whitson's time after completing her 9th spacewalk, which was 5.5 hours on Thursday with fellow ISS castaway Butch Wilmore. Williams and Wilmore have been at the ISS since early June due to problems with the Boeing Starliner. They're expected to return in March. 3 Dodgers players meet with the Pacific Palisades Fire Department to thank them for their hard work fighting the recent fires. Shohei Ohtani, Emmett Sheehan, and Ben Kasparius visited the fire station 69 Thursday. In that visit, the players announced a donation of $10,000 to the station, plus an additional $350,000 to LA's Fire Department Foundation. Fire Station 69 was the first to respond to the fires that destroyed thousands of homes. Ohtani took the opportunity to express his gratitude.
I want to just say thank you for your dedication, hard work. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Ohtani announced that he would donate $500,000 to help the victims of the fires. Brazilian soccer star Neymar announces he's coming back home to play with his boyhood club. Neymar posted an emotional video to X Thursday confirming he's joining Santos nearly 12 years after leaving the Sao Paulo-based team. The 32-year-old made his professional debut with the club in 2009 and went on to score 138 goals in 225 appearances while winning 6 titles before joining FC Barcelona in 2013. Neymar plans to sign a short-term deal following the industry-riddled stint in Saudi Arabia, where he played only 7 games but earned $100 million. He's the Brazilian national team's all-time leading scorer and still plans to play in the 2026 World Cup. All right, that's going to round out my hour. I'm Dana Alexa. To learn more about our network, please visit our website at oann.com.